3 polymaths, 3 continents, and 3 learning techniques that they use to educate themselves into these well-rounded legends of history. And these you can apply to your own learning in 2026. And of course, we'll get into all of the practical, actionable steps for doing exactly that. And don't worry, because you haven't heard of these before. I'm not putting in the Feynman technique. There's no basic note-taking. It's not, rah bro, just focus. No, we're going a little bit deeper than that this time. Now first, what you definitely won't learn from these polymaths is how to become an absolute machine with emails. The problem is most email services are stuck in the past. They're chaotic, they're clunky, they get overwhelming very fast. Which is why today's video partner is Superhuman Mail, part of the Superhuman Productivity Suite. This is an email tool to declutter my inbox. Its AI helps me with the boring, repetitive parts and lets me actually get stuff done in a fraction of the time. When I'm involved in many different conversations, it's a pain to have to backtrack and slog through to find all the details I need. I mean, half the time I miss them and I have to start from the beginning. Superhuman Mail's AI does that for me in seconds. It resurfaces key details so I know exactly what I need to do and when, without the usual friction. Now, I suck at replying to emails, especially the boring admin stuff. But then it piles up and only gets worse. Superhuman Mail's auto drafts feature helps me stay on top of those follow-ups. And it will even make a draft message for me to work with, so I'm not typing the same thing from scratch for the millionth time. This feature is essential for when I know what I want to say, but I'm too busy to fully flesh out an email. To clean up your inbox and make your digital life a little less stressful, you can sign up and get 1 month free of Superhuman Mail with my link. That's superhuman.com/Odysseus, so check it out and I hope you enjoy. Beginning in the East, we have Ibn al-Haytham of the Islamic Golden Age. He was born in the year 965 in Basra, which is now part of modern-day Iraq, but then it was part of the Shiite Buyid dynasty. In his early life, his study was directed towards civil service and religion, especially the many conflicts and contrasts of Islamic theology. Now, he stepped away from this to focus on mathematics and science, inspired by Western figures like Aristotle, Euclid, Ptolemy, and even some earlier Islamic peers, of course. Now, at some point, he moved to Egypt, and this is where his life gets a little bit mad. I mean, literally. Egypt was then recently conquered by the Fatimid Caliphate, ruled by Caliph al-Hakim. Al-Hakim, okay. No. Now, this guy was said to be cruel and eccentric. I mean, even going as far as ordering all dogs to be killed because the barking annoyed him. But at least he was a patron of the sciences, so all is forgiven. One story says that al-Haytham met with the Caliph after he proposed a way to regulate the flow of the Nile. But upon scouting the area, he quickly realized that wasn't happening. It was impossible. This disappointed al-Hakim, but thankfully he didn't crash out and immediately behead him on the spot, no. But his fate would be far worse. Al-Haytham was appointed to an admin role. Oh, horrible. But the promising young scientist must have feared the Caliph, worried that he would become unstable and maybe turn on him. And so to avoid this, he feigned madness. And that got him put under house arrest, which apparently worked. Naturally, this gave him a lot of time for his scientific work, his astronomy, his mathematics, his physics, and most famously, his contributions to optics and vision. And that all became his magnum opus, which we now know as the Book of Optics. In this book, he used experiments to debunk the extramission theory of sight, which was popular for over 1,000 years at his time. And this theory said that we see by shooting rays or light out of our eyes. Now, he was the first to demonstrate the opposite intromission theory, which is when light bounces off of objects and is captured by our eyes. He even went on to argue that vision, since it was subjective, must happen in the brain. And this is just a snapshot. There's so much he studied, but I want to get moving. Now, all this background info is cool, but I don't bring it up for no reason. I say it because al-Haytham's polymath technique runs through it every step of the way. He was a pioneer of the scientific method and of healthy skepticism. Therefore, the seeker after the truth is not one who studies the writings of the ancients and, following his natural disposition, puts his trust in them, but rather the one who suspects his faith in them and questions what he gathers from them. The one who submits to argument and demonstration, and not to the sayings of a human being whose nature is fraught with all kinds of imperfection and deficiency. He relied strictly on controlled testing to reach his conclusions, and he is said to be the first to ever use an independent variable that you slowly change and see what happens, amidst the control variables, which is exactly how we learn it today. This means the truth remained unemotional and objective, independent of the fragile mind, and rooted in something solid. But what use is that to you? You don't have an alchemy lab in your room, and unless you're in college, you can't, make potions and tinker with experiments. No. So how do you apply this to your own life? By steelmanning the opposition, which really is a method of doubt and skepticism. Let me explain that. Well, I can't be asked, he'll do it for me. The duty of the man who investigates the writings of scientists, if learning the truth is his goal, is to make himself an enemy of all that he reads, and attack it from every side. He should also suspect himself as he performs his critical examination of it, so that he may avoid falling into either prejudice or leniency. Thinking is hard. It's bogged down by tribalism, by echo chambers, by the feeling that any criticism is an attack on our identity. Changing our mind is hard because it means losing a part of us, and so we put up a shield, we become defensive. This means that you must be your own fiercest critic, because no one else can do the same job. They have 100 mental shields to get through. But proving yourself wrong, well, that's easier because you win either way. Now, you do this by raising a steel man to opposing arguments. The term steel man is the opposite of the straw man, which I'm sure you've heard. The straw man is where, instead of attacking the argument head on, you attack a weaker argument or a side argument that no one ever made. And you do that essentially to get a cheap win and feel like you come out on top. For example, and this is just an example, so don't get pissed off, but let's say you come to some conclusion like, we should tax the rich and redistribute to the poor. Now, okay, instinctively that sounds good. They'll be fine, they have enough, and of course will help reduce poverty, will lift the poor out of their stratum. Now, you might think anyone opposing that is greedy, a bootlicker, they're paid off, or they just hate the poor and they're part of the elite. Now, in some cases, those could be real arguments. Some people are paid off, some people do truly hate the poor. But in maybe most cases, they are cheap accusations and straw men. They don't attack the economic substance of the argument, and instead they resort to, an ad hominem or an argument that nobody ever made. The least you can do in debate and in all of learning is to first understand arguments and then treat them charitably. And not just ideas you find in the wild, but even your own, the ones you already believe. And that is what we call steel manning. You have to put ideas under scrutiny and test how valid they are. And you do that by steel manning, by raising the strongest possible counter-argument to them. Even if you agree, even if you disagree. To not steel man the opposition is like saying, well, I'm the best boxer in the world, but you never fight world-class boxers. So how do you know? You need to literally get in the ring with these steel men and fight them. And may the best man win, may the best ideas win. In our earlier example about taxing the rich, well, you have to study now taxation, how wealth is built, the policy of redistribution and how that's worked. You have to look at the economic ethics and policy that underlines it. And don't get me wrong, this is massive. This is not an easy question to answer, and it's not like we figure things out in a single evening. No, this takes a long time. It's a continuous process. But you must do it nonetheless, because that is how you grow and change your mind and refine your arguments, and maybe abandon them completely. Now, if you steel man the opposition and it ends up dismantling your own belief, fantastic. You have done something that people will refuse to do for years, decades, maybe their whole life. You have proven yourself wrong without the emotional cost. And you have the humility to change your mind and to seek the truth. In the Book of Optics, there are passages written by al-Haytham that dismantle some of his old positions. And it's that kind of aggressive self-doubt that helped him discover new ideas and move forward. Now, let's say you steel man the opposition and it still fails to change your mind or to debunk the original position. Well, that's also fine. Maybe you're right. Maybe you have yet to find a compelling piece of evidence against what you believe. And in that case, well, fair enough. Changing your mind isn't necessarily a good thing. You can change your mind for the worse, and the point is to do so carefully and prudently, with evidence. And it wasn't a waste of time, because now you know the counter-argument. You know the discussion more thoroughly, and you, I guess, are prepared to address that if it comes up in a debate or a conversation. Now, of course, this is always evolving. Maybe the more advanced or complicated counter-arguments are just beyond your knowledge and you don't get them. Or maybe you haven't encountered them in the wild. And so there is nothing in your periphery that can change your mind, but it's still out there for you to find. You must be constantly on the lookout for these. You must constantly stress test what you believe. And that is why reading widely is so important. You have to go beyond your usual spheres. And I don't mean the bottom feeding morons of the left or the right or whatever dialectic you're looking at, right? But the people who are actually smart and who challenge you and who make you think. Does dialectic make sense there? Big ass word. A method of reasoning or discussion where two opposing ideas or forces are considered. Yeah, that makes sense. Now, in most cases, the steelman counter-arguments will not completely demolish your worldview overnight. I mean, if it does, it probably deserved it. It had to go. It had to be killed off. Realistically, though, it's going to happen every now and then and gradually. You'll see something that changes how you think a little bit. Maybe you change your mind slightly, it refines how you think, and that happens over a long period of time. Steel manning will undermine parts of your argument, but also not make a dent in others. Some bits you'll leave behind, some bits you'll evolve. There is nuance, and that is healthy. So the takeaway message is you are stupid and untrustworthy, and you should aggressively argue against yourself in public. When one compares the talents one has with those of a Leibniz, one is tempted to throw away one's books and go die quietly in the dark of some forgotten corner. This is what Denis Diderot, a fellow philosopher and critic, had to say about Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz, our second polymath. He was born in Leipzig in Saxony in 1646, then part of the Holy Roman Empire and shaken by the 30-Year War. Now, his background was of the elites. His father was a professor of moral philosophy at the University of Leipzig, and his mother was the daughter of a law professor. So he had that background. And this is where the stage was set for a great polymath to rise. Growing up, Leibniz had access to his father's huge library. So he discovered ancient history, the church fathers, and of course philosophy. Now, after graduating with his own doctorate of law, he found work with the Elector of Mainz. Now, this was a church leader second only in authority to the emperor. So it was a big deal. And here he wrote a lot on theology and natural philosophy. Now, this was nothing groundbreaking at the time, but it set the stage for his greatest career opportunity. He was sent on a diplomatic mission to Paris, which was then just teeming with the great European minds. Here he met and was mentored by the Dutch physicist and mathematician Christiaan Huygens, and that propelled him to make his own great contributions to the field, especially calculus, and you have to remember that for later. Now, after the death of the Elector, Leibniz was urged to find a career elsewhere, and he eventually became the historian, the librarian, and the political advisor to the House of Brunswick in Hanover. I mean, this guy's got the coolest jobs. What's going on? Now, this further expanded his scope into writing about things relevant to the house, like the politics and the history, but they also tolerated his side missions in calculus, in logic, in philosophy. He wrote and wrote and wrote. And it was the calculus which darkened the rest of his life, but also cemented his name in the books. In 1708, the Royal Society accused Leibniz of plagiarizing Isaac Newton's calculus, and an investigation by the same group upheld that claim. Now, mind you, Newton was the president of the Royal Society at the time, so I don't know about that. A bit of a conflict of interest there. And to back up my guy a bit more, we do see modern mathematicians lift that blame from him. They say, well, okay, it was a coincidence that they established it at the same time, but there were enough key differences that set them apart and probably make it just a coincidence. Now, this brings us to one of his secrets of polymathy, and it's the art of notation. And it will sound oddly specific at first, but trust me, it's relevant to you. Now, Leibniz invented much of the calculus notation we use today, the long S integral sign, and the D used for differentials. Oh fuck, it gives me PTSD just talking about it. Oh, hello. Wow. Ugh. Here's my tea, man. Now, this was not merely what felt right. It wasn't based on vibes. There was a good reason it actually ended up beating out Newton's notation in the popularity contest. Leibniz's notation captured meaning. It was a clever and intuitive way to physically see the relationships between the variables, as if you could see the maths unfold on paper in front of you. Think of it like seeing a chemical reaction instead of just writing about it. Like, yes, a formula is one thing, but it's different when you can see the gas being produced and you can feel the heat. Now, I read that Newton mainly wrote for himself, so maybe he wasn't trying to be understood, whereas Leibniz grappled with the best way to symbolically represent the field. And it's that exact philosophy you can use in your own learning, even beyond calculus, with whatever. You can create personal meaning over new ideas through diagrams, through models, through pictures, through symbols, and even through new terms that you completely make up. Now, you probably already do this in some way as you read. Maybe you doodle a picture, or what I like to do is create a diagram over a concept just to kind of make sense of it. In itself, it's a test of knowledge that makes you smarter. Can you transform what the author has said into a model, a diagram, a picture? And not just something you understand, but something a stranger could read and get. That is application, and that is proof that you've understood something. Now, if you struggle, maybe it's a sign you're stumped. If you can't draw a synapse from memory, or you can't represent a political system through a diagram, then do you really get it? Probably not, and you need to revisit the source. So the takeaway is, use diagrams, use symbols, use pictures, use models. Take concepts and these big chunks of text and transform them into something maybe tangible, something you can see, something that shows you how it works in practice. That is maybe the single best and most fun way to apply ideas. Our third polymath is Richard Feynman, And no, it's not the Feynman technique. We're in the big leagues now. This is something a little more obscure. But first, who was this man and how did he become a household name? Feynman was born of New York in 1918, and he grew up to be a curious and academically sharp student. He went on to study and work in several prestigious universities of the US East and West, and he was eventually recruited into the Manhattan Project, where he worked on a range of projects, of course mostly around fission bombs and reactors. His main achievements, the reasons behind his Nobel Prize, were his contributions to quantum physics. But really, that's not why we know him. His status as a popular celebrity scientist comes from a lecture series he gave at Caltech on introductory physics, and this is when he was trying to get more involved in the education of the subject. These lectures and the books they inspired made the field more accessible both to students and lay people, and he would always stress true understanding over the fickle memorization of formulas and facts and essentially the modern education system. Another academic virtue he stood for was healthy skepticism, much like al-Haytham from earlier. Feynman was good at stripping himself of all that he thought he knew and then building it from the ground up, conscious that without that base, you could easily fool yourself and chase dead ends. It's epistemology in practice. How do we know what we know, and what can we know for sure? Also, I can't lie, Feynman had aura. It's undeniable. You know, many scientists today are these grey, tired people, that they're limp-wristed, they're losers. But Feynman was cool. He was eccentric, he was flawed in some ways, maybe a little crazy as well. He allegedly got into violent rages when his wife interrupted his bongo sessions. He would work and hold meetings in strip clubs, and he seemed to be an early pioneer of the Sigma male pickup artist movement, that sort of thing. I also read, this is funny, that he would hire his female students to be nude models for his painting. So it's crazy stuff. That's misconduct. Now, I'm not here to make a moral judgment and to wag my finger like it's a HR office, but he had that coarse, charismatic style of, you know, celebrity chefs, for example. And I think that is a big reason for his mass appeal. Now let's get to his polymath technique, Feynman's 12 favorite problems. This was a short list of about a dozen questions or problems that he struggled with and was interested in, and they would sit in the back of his mind, often dormant. As he worked and explored new fields and picked up new ideas, he would test them against his list of 12 problems to see if there were any revelations, any answers, anything new. Mostly, that never happened. But when it did, it provided a new avenue to explore, and that could lead to some solid or unique answer, something potentially groundbreaking. It's like finding a key in a massive bank vault. You can try it over and over again, testing every single box, and they're not going to budge. But eventually, you're going to unlock one, and you're going to hit the jackpot, hopefully. Another way to see it is that these questions gave him direction as he learned. They were the order in the chaos. They were something to refer back to whenever he encountered new information. Now, this might be hard to imagine, so I'm just going to show you what some of his 12 problems looked like. How can I accurately keep track of time in my head? How can we design a large-scale computing system using only basic equipment? How can I write a sentence in perfect handwritten Chinese script? What is the unifying principle underlying light, radio, magnetism, and electricity? How can I sustain a two-handed polyrhythm on the drums? How can we measure the probability that a lump of uranium might explode too soon? Now notice how some of these questions were small and related to his hobbies, like the African drums, whereas others were broad and fundamental. And I imagine that the small problems were, of course, solved more quickly, and they would provide a hit of motivation, a reason to keep going. And the others, that would follow you for a bit longer. Now, how do you apply this in practice? Well, you could copy Feynman and just have a broad list of 12 questions that could be about anything. Or, and I think I prefer this, you could do subject by subject questions. So for whatever topic you're interested in, each one has 12 problems or challenges that you're trying to figure out, and you just store them somewhere and maybe try and answer them one day. You can see them as your learning objectives. They are a success criteria. If you can answer all these questions, you've done a damn good job. Now, rather than aimlessly gathering information and just remembering a bunch of facts, you actually have a vector. You have something to work towards, something to achieve and finish. Now, pinpointing these questions can be tough, and you don't have to do it immediately. Sometimes you can just get started with learning whatever, and the questions will appear, they will uncover themselves. But for now, here are some prompts to help you get started. Which problems or ideas do you regularly encounter or struggle with? Which big questions relating to your interests do you often think about? What are your values and aspirations that you struggle to make real? What do you often find yourself debating or getting emotional over? What topics do you feel are most important in today's society, that you have the responsibility of knowing. Get that list written down, keep it close, keep it in the back of your mind, and it will change how you interact with new information. If you want a more general guide on how to become a polymath, a routine, a strategy, then check out this video on screen. Leave your comments below, get a discussion going, and thank you so much for watching.